Good morning, everyone. I'm Hank McKinnell, and I will be chairing the next to final session of the 14th Annual Science and Technology in Society Forum. These are the key messages from the concurrent sessions. This is an important meeting summary for two reasons. One is over the last 2.5 days, we will have had 10 plenary sessions, 30 concurrent sessions, for a total of 40 with 250 speakers. So if you were really diligent and attended every session you could, you would have attended 10. So the purpose of this is to tell you what happened in some of the other sessions that you weren't able to attend. Secondly, what's important in this forum is not so much what the speakers said, but what you heard, what you were going to take away from these 2.5 days here in Kyoto, Japan. So I've asked the speakers, in addition to summarizing briefly the sessions, but to give you their take on what they learned, what their impressions were, what they take away from these sessions. So here's my take, for what it's worth, with three important questions. The first is, it was apparent to me by the end of this session that we're at an inflection point in history. And I believe that will be no less profound than the voyages of exploration and discovery of the 16th and 17th century, when the known world became much larger. And the second major inflection point in history was the Industrial Revolution in the 19th and 20th century, which changed society and economies as we know them. So the question is, how do we prepare ourselves, our children, and society for what clearly will be a profoundly different world? My second reaction is that we're tending to look at these important issues through the wrong end of the telescope. A telescope is very helpful in seeing things at great distance, but what you may not realize, if you reverse a telescope and look in the wrong end, it's also pretty good at magnifying things that are right in front of you. And that's understandable, because research on the human brain shows that we are programmed to overestimate short-term effects and to underestimate long-term effects. Food and water today are much more important than food and water 3 years from now. So this is a natural phenomenon, but I'm a little concerned that we are underestimating the long-term effects here. And the question is, how can we imagine the future we want to live in 20 years' time? So let me give you a couple of examples. Autonomous driving vehicles, which were discussed in these sessions. Cities are built for cars. They're actually built for parked cars. So think about the community you live in and how it could be different if all the parked cars disappeared. We could have walking malls, we could have parks, we could have vegetable gardens. We could redesign our cities around people, not around parked cars. If transportation was available on demand and you didn't need a place to park your own personal vehicle. That would be quite a different place to live. Secondly, artificial intelligence, which was discussed during this session. Much of what we know as work clearly will be done by machines. So what does that mean for the 40-hour work week? What does it mean for a 20 or 30-year career? And maybe more importantly, what replaces work? Now, my hope is it will be higher level work, more creative, more knowledge-based, but there may well be a boom in leisure time activities, recreation, and the arts. This is something we should give some thought to. And my list goes on and on out of these many sessions. Colonies on Mars, 2022, by the way, it's been promised. No less exciting than the early explorers who opened up North America and Australia, New Zealand. Rocket trips, Tokyo to New York in 30 minutes. That's kind of exciting, actually. And maybe virtual reality, so we don't have to take that trip. We don't have to travel from Tokyo to New York. We can put our headset on and we will be there. That's a quite different world and something that we need to give some additional thought to. And my final observation was the question of risk and innovation. How is a society to manage risk and still ensure that we're able to seek innovation? Think about those early explorers, Drake, Magellan, Columbus. Those ships had no government inspection certificate. They didn't have a permit for their voyage. Had they applied for one, it probably would have been deemed far too dangerous. And they had no diversity in their crews. This is something government never would have allowed. But there is very good news here. I was extremely pleased to hear Prime Minister Abe announce on this stage on Sunday that autonomous driving vehicles can be tested in Japan without government permits. Now, whether this survives the first crash with a school bus, I guess remains to be seen, but it is a great way to spur innovation. And frankly, who knows better the risks of autonomous driving vehicles than the people who produce them, rather than a government bureaucrat? Now, risk has to be managed. I think what Prime Minister Abe was saying is that he believes in technology, and he said that. And he believes that those who produce the technology, with some government oversight, not none, are able to manage those risks. So my prediction here is that if this policy is broadly adopted within Japan, we are going to see a tsunami of new innovation. Finally, I'd like to present a challenge to all of you here today. And that is the need for better understanding of what you do and the role of science and technology in society. When I was working at Stanford on my own PhD, I was told that the PhD degree required a PhD dissertation. And my thesis advisor advised me that a PhD dissertation was a contribution to knowledge. And then he went on to say, but nobody's ever defined a contribution to whose knowledge. So his advice was that I complete my dissertation, recognize that was not my life's work, and then to get on with my career. Now, at that time, the typical PhD was 8 or 9 years at a university, kind of cheap labor as research assistants and teaching assistants, frankly. But the message was, there is life beyond the university. So my challenge to you is first, keep doing great science. That's where it all begins. But use that science to develop knowledge. And use that knowledge to develop products and services that benefit all mankind. Thank you. So I've recruited a few of my friends here to summarize the 7-ring circus we had going here today. I won't introduce each of them at this point. I will introduce them as they begin their comments. First is Thomas Zakaria, Director of the Oak Ridge National Laboratory in the United States, who will summarize the energy and environment discussions for us.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be here, and I have the daunting task of summarizing the key messages from the sessions on energy and environment, focused on future prospects of oil, nuclear energy, renewable energy, and the best mix of energy. And the reason why I said daunting is because it was a fascinating 4 sessions where I had expected, I didn't know what to expect, but I found those 4 sessions to be really uplifting. It was not a defensive discussion, but it's really about what the art of the possible for the future. In some sense, people coming together, putting their best ideas on the table in order to reimagine the future and being part of that future. If I were to look at my own career, I have tracked, my career has tracked the progress in microprocessors. So when I started somewhat early in my career, I was involved in massively parallel computing, which is when the microprocessors really took over. And I'm struck by the fact that all of us, I'm sure, all of us carry a phone in our jacket or pant pockets. That actually today is faster than the fastest supercomputer in the world in 1995, where I did much of the work. Now, if I could have imagined that much progress would have happened, I would have really looked at the world somewhat differently, perhaps from the other end of the telescope, if you will. And I think that is what I would take away from this meeting, is that it's really at an inflection point where each doubling of the technology or each improvement in the technology offers tremendous opportunity for making progress. Let me begin by saying that it's been a tremendous privilege to be part of the discussions and to interact with influential thinkers from a variety of disciplines and key decision makers from around the globe. I'm convinced that we need this level of cooperation and systemic thinking in order to achieve the solutions that we must have to meet the Sustainable Development Goals. Clean and affordable energy is now seen as a precondition for sustainable economic growth and improved human well-being, with direct impacts on health, education, jobs, and gender equality. By 2050, it is estimated that world population will increase from today's 7.5 billion to approximately 10 billion. In meeting the energy demands of this growing population, it is clear that there is no silver bullet and no free lunch. So let me now summarize some key points from the 4 sessions and discussions. I'll first touch on some of the discussions around future prospects of oil and gas. Clearly, oil and natural gas have played an instrumental role in economic transformation and mobility in everyday life for the majority of the world's population. Despite significant improvements in efficiency, the energy requirements of an expanding middle class in the developing world will increase oil and gas demand significantly over the next 3 decades. At the same time, the shale gas boom in the United States and the Paris Climate Accords, however, have changed the industry's outlook for the future of oil and gas. The International Energy Agency says that in order to come close to its 2% target for limiting increases in global temperature, oil demand will have to peak in 2020 at 93 billion barrels per day, just about current levels. Air pollution and congestion in big cities are pushing countries like China and India to look for alternatives to petrol and diesel as transportation fuels. As a result, oil use in passenger transport and freight is expected to fall over the next 25 years, to be replaced by natural gas, electricity, and biofuels. As you can imagine, a number of automotive manufacturers have either completely dedicated to electric vehicles or are switching to electric vehicles. Just yesterday, General Motors announced that by year 2023, they'll have not 1, not 2, but 20 new models of electric vehicles on the market. Barring a major technology disruption, however, oil to fuel heavy goods vehicles, airplanes, and ships, and to make plastics will be needed for many years to come. even with the prospect that major economies will actively work to shift away from oil at a time when cost of production oil is declining through technological innovation, the perception among the participants was that we may be entering an era of peak demand that could extend over several decades. There is clear recognition among the oil and gas producers that were present at the meeting that they need to transform themselves. To quote one executive, if the oil and gas sector continues to do what it did when the price of oil was $100 a barrel, it'll become a dinosaur. A more pragmatic view is that the industry needs to reinvent the future. Technology and innovation are key to this transformation. Another approach that was discussed is to vertically integrate for more efficiency and cost containment. So there were lots of projects basically aimed at integrating from oil producers to services. For example, there was discussion about perhaps actually retrofitting a project, ongoing project to retrofit an LNG tanker with electricity producing capability so they can actually be offshore and deliver electricity to the grid. There was also extensive discussion of carbon capture and storage. While this could be effective for point sources, it was also recognized that for distributed sources, it'll remain a challenge. Now, whereas at the same time, in the nuclear technology prospect session, there was quite a bit of discussion around the vital role the nuclear power play in decarbonization and the fact that it needs to be accessible to countries interested in making it part of their sustainable energy strategies. Today, there are more than 400 reactors in operation worldwide, accounting for 2.3% of global energy and 10.5% of global electricity supply. Nuclear power, even though we now have a 60-year record of contributing to a diversified energy supply, there was a sentiment among the group that it still should be considered as a relatively new technology. Several challenges were identified, including safety, waste, proliferation, cost, and sustainability. Overcoming each of these challenges will require innovation. Furthermore, it was stated that a major impediment to deeper penetration of nuclear technology is the absence of international standards regarding nuclear technology. The question was raised, if you can get in an airplane and fly from Europe and land in the US without actually having to worry about licensing in both places, that there could be actually a similar kind of standards where a nuclear power technology can be licensed based on international standards. The ability of nuclear technology to contribute to industrial heating for a variety of applications was highlighted. There was also discussion on the importance of using nuclear technology in the medical field to achieve unique goals. Perhaps the session that was most attended was the renewable energy, and a very high level of participation from really a packed house. As you can imagine, renewable energy provides substantial benefits for our environment, our health, our economy. It dramatically reduces greenhouse gas emissions, improves public health, and provides jobs and other economic benefits. Since most renewables don't require water for cooling, they dramatically reduce the water requirements for power production compared to fossil fuel power plants. With continued improvements in technology and pricing, significant ramp-up of renewable energy deployment can be expected, was the consensus of the group. Germany just hit a new record of 78% of renewable energy on the grid. The National Renewable Energy Laboratory in the United States has recently issued a report asserting that the United States can meet up to 80% of its energy needs with renewable energy. And certainly modeling work that's been done in Australia suggests that it can achieve a goal of 100% renewable by 2050. But in order for renewable energy to be viable, there was also recognition that needs to be a smart grid technology that needs to be developed, and also grid-wide storage technology. There is tremendous progress that is being made there, but there is still much more work to be done. And the last session was about the best mix of energy. The session on best mix of energy began by reframing the topic itself as an optimal mix of energy. Given the complexity and multiplicity of energy systems worldwide, no uniform solution can make them more sustainable while simultaneously addressing environmental, social, and economic imperatives. Even though a passionate argument was made for a world that operates on 100% renewable energy and 100% electricity, it was felt that at least in the interim, a more realistic pathway might be an all-of-the-above strategy, with the optimal mix of energy sources driven primarily by the needs and characteristics of a particular country or region. Therefore, it's imperative for science and technology to continue to offer technological innovations across a spectrum of energy options. The overwhelming sentiment across all 4 sessions was that these are systemic problems that require systems-level solutions and broad-based collaborations across national and geographic boundaries. Let me close with a story from The Economist from last year. At the first International Urban Planning Conference held in New York in 1898, horse manure was at the top of the agenda as a major environmental hazard. You see, London had 300,000 horses, and New York had about 100,000 horses, pulling cabs and carts, leaving a swamp of manure and fly-infested dung heaps. No remedies could be found, and the disappointed delegates returned home a week early. A decade later, the environmental problem was all but eradicated by market forces brought about by Henry Ford and the mass production of Model T. By 1912, cars outnumbered horses in New York, and the city's last horse-drawn streetcar was retired in 1917. This marked the moment when oil came of age. Perhaps in years to come, we will all look back to STS Forum 2017 as the start of a major shift in investment strategies and policies that move the world towards a sustainable energy production. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Zakaria. Next is the life science discussions, which will be summarized by Professor Harriet Wahlberg. Professor Wahlberg is Director General, Ministry of Health and Social Affairs in Sweden. She is a professor of physiology and a former president of the Karolinska Institute. Professor Wahlberg.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I have the privilege of reporting from the life science track, and the discussions have been both lively and intense, and the chairperson as well as the speakers have done actually an outstanding job to address the different topics and giving their own perspective on the topics. Common for all 4 sessions was the notion that we are experiencing a fast technical development in areas like imaging, ICT, genome engineering, big data, and robotics. And this development has created more interdisciplinary collaborations as well as international collaborations. It has also opened up for new opportunities and possibilities for advancements, but it also has created a need for regulations and involvement of the general public, and those are the things we did address at the 4 different sessions. Now, the first topic was environment and health. Clearly, the impact of human activities on the environment is a great challenge today. The world's population is estimated to be around 7.5 billion people and growing with 1.1% per year. And we all of us who are sitting here, we are a burden. We are a burden on the environment. We create pollution, the spread of zoonotic disease, decrease in forest and coral reefs, damaging water supplies, to mention some. Now, this creates health problems because we change all the ecosystems. Emerging infectious diseases in developing countries are examples of this, especially diseases like the avian flu, Zika, or Ebola. And we do see an accelerated spread of infectious diseases due to the increased globalized activities of humans. We discussed an example where actually industry can contribute in terms of environment and health. And that one example is reducing the harm of consuming tobacco by smokers who are unable to stop smoking. Tobacco companies are now producing electronic cigarettes, which are 95% less harmful than regular cigarettes. And obviously, quite a few smokers, given the choice, are choosing to utilize the electronic cigarettes instead. So this is one way to combat smoking. Now, from this session, the take-home message was that it's very important to combine clinical and basic science in both education and research when combating the effect of environment and health. Also, it was pointed out that importance of collaboration and the sharing of health-related data. And here we have a challenge related to the sharing of such information, and that is, of course, the privacy concerns. Then the next session was genome engineering, and we are today in this area seeing a powerful development of new technologies, which provides us with unprecedented speed and precision to affect the genome. This development forces us to manage these techniques ethically and regulatory. The CRISP and Cas technologies have advanced gene engineering and editing tremendously. But it's not only the CRISP and Cas techniques we were discussing. We also talked about the iPS cells and synthetic biology approaches. Genome editing technologies can be applied to human diseases, but also optimize agriculture systems. This technique can also be used to create disease models for developing or carrying out cell transplantation treatments or developing new drugs. But now, it is important, and this was heavily discussed during the session, it is important to distinguish between somatic genetics and germline genetics. And germline, for you in the audience who are not so familiar with the life science area, the germline is another word for the reproductive cells, like sperm and egg. Thus, there are still questions surrounding germline engineering. The question is whether we should utilize these techniques to correct devastating, untreatable diseases in children, for instance. This is not only a question for the scientists. Here, politicians, lawmakers, society, and the general population has to take part. Other problems which need to be addressed are there unknown consequences that can occur from correcting gene mutations? What is ethically acceptable in terms of correcting mutations, changing genes, etc.? And we cannot forget about the danger with these techniques if utilized for the wrong reasons, such as bioweapons and bioterrorism. Now, the take-home message here was there is a need for more constructive discussions on genetic engineering with the general public. And society has a responsibility to create a suitable ethical and legal framework. The next session was advanced medicine. This session is a summary of where medicine is going in the future. Genes are the basis for a lot of diseases. Clearly, in the future, we will see more of therapy of genes. We can already today correct sick genes with healthy genes. One such example is the production of new genes for healthy hemoglobin to people with sickle cell anemia. Every physician has experienced the following. Namely, when you give the same drug to patients, you have responders and non-responders. That means that even if you have the same disease, your genes are different and you will respond to the drug differently. Thus, to advance medicine further, we need to stratify people and we need to stratify patients within a certain disease to find out who will respond and who will not. This is today done in cancer, but not in many other diseases. In the developing world, the question is how to deliver health care and drugs which are affordable. In quite a few of the African countries, there are examples of very successful treatment of HIV. This is partly because healthcare workers have been trained in new technology and new infrastructure, and new infrastructure has been built in these sites. The take-home message from this session is basically bringing medicines to developing countries is really a matter of price of the drugs. And the second one is stratification of patient is very important. It's happening in cancer, but not in other diseases. We ended with a session on healthy aging. We discussed the difference between a long life and a healthy life. Clearly, it is healthy aging we want to provide for our populations. Life expectancy is increasing. In the UK, we learned that 18% is over 65 today. 2030, it will be 25%. Worldwide, the year 2050, 20% will be over 65. This results in increase in age-related diseases such as dementia and Alzheimer and other diseases. And this development also put pressure on families as well as on society, where a greater demand on social services and different housing and infrastructures occur. In this session, it was also noted that aging is interesting from an evolutionary point of view. There are actually some species which do not age. I'm not quite sure you all knew that. I did not. Worms and corals, for instance, instead, they replace their parts. Humans age, though. We can all see that if we look around us. And we, as humans, are dependent on that we can repair parts of our cell machinery to grow older. And you can definitely live longer if your cells can repair. Lifestyle factors as well as genes are important. People live the longest here in Japan, average 84 years life expectancy. In Europe, in many countries, it's 83 years. In the US, 79 years. However, some African countries are in the bottom with 50 to 53 years. And the reason behind these different numbers are clearly related to lifestyle factors, education, access to health care. However, exactly how these relate is not quite clarified. From this session, the take-home message was that society and politicians have to address the special situation we will have in the near future with a growing proportion of the population above 65 years old. To sum up, it is clear to me that in the life science, we are moving to a world where we are forced to cooperate and work together over the country borders to achieve a better world for humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wahlberg. Next, the discussions on engineering and innovation will be summarized by Professor Donna Nelson. Professor Nelson is a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at the University of Oklahoma and is a past president of the American Chemical Society. Professor Nelson.
Well, thank you.
First, I'd like to express my appreciation for being invited. It's a great honor to be here. Thank you. And so for my remarks, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, I'm to report out from Engineering Innovation. So there were 4 sessions there: Industrial Innovation, Future Nanomaterials, New Manufacturing Technologies, Robotics, and Autonomous Systems. Now, in these 4 sessions, there was actually quite a bit of overlap and some relationship between the information given there, some duplication in their significance, concerns, and possible approaches to solutions for problems. So the information naturally formed 3 groups, and so I'm going to use that grouping because in my teaching organic chemistry, I've learned that one way to help people remember the material is to group similar items together. So there's a lot of different ways that one could group information such as this, but it seemed to form 3 natural groups, which you will probably, some of you will recognize. So first, the product or purpose being developed. Second, the process to be used in developing it. And third, the people who will be involved or impacted. And within each of those, I've divided this into goals and then concerns and considerations, which are often the most important. And then within each of those, I've tried to start with most general and work down to more specific. So, for product or purpose, the goals. We need to look, we need new nanomaterials to extend Moore's law into 3 dimensions. We need to look beyond CMOS, quantum computing based on new nanoscale devices like graphene, carbon nanotubes, photonic crystals. We need more customizable parts via additive manufacturing and biomanufacturing to give more advanced and specialized materials. A goal is seamless digital transformation. Applications of collaborative, connected, cognitive robots. Application to problems and opportunities in emerging economies. And we need to move more from weak AI to strong AI. The concerns and considerations are there are similarities in the evolution of robotics versus computers. You may remember when we first started out with computers, you sat down in front of your computer, which was not attached to anything. It was you and your computer, your dedicated computer. Then you moved to mainframes, and now we are at ubiquitous computing. And so it seems that we're going down the same track with robotics. There are challenges in robotics design, material, energy, and usage. We have embodied versus disembodied intelligence. There are robotics limitations and breakthroughs. Robot acceptability, usability, and sustainability. The balance between utility and safety. So robots are currently not suitable for non-controlled environments such as farming and vineyards. Service robots are currently more useful. In a number of sessions, Roomba was mentioned, the robot which vacuums your floor. There are physical versus virtual robots like chatbots that we've all used. Some tasks would be inappropriate for robots, such as in nursing homes, where the human touch is very important in that activity. So for process, the goals: to reinvent the chemical industry, reduce the carbon dioxide footprint and use of resources via intensification, so that's size reductions so as to make, for example, more compact plants. Additive manufacturing, artificial intelligence, and fourth, disruptive technologies. Another goal: to increase the synthesis, functionalization, characterization, modeling of new materials, and that can be quite challenging. To automate manufacturing with AI-equipped robot workers. To increase design-led innovation. to have the interconnection of equipment, to use information technologies to improve machinery, systems, and customer support, to use value stream information and simulations to improve products and processes. So concerns and considerations, there's the autonomous behavior versus supervised or guardian angel approach, the use of specialized AI and the proliferation of deep learning. So for the third category, and that's people, a goal is to have human workers more skilled via augmented reality with information coming from microsensor data from the Internet of Things and cloud computing. People must be trained and educated in order to foster the industrial innovation. A proper environment must be provided to workers to develop workplace creativity and innovation. Undesirable jobs can be given to robots. And one person mentioned the 4 Ds. So these would be jobs that are dull, dangerous, dirty, or delicate, so that they would be more appropriate for robots than humans. The concerns and considerations coming from these. So human-centric and collaborative robotics are revolutionizing automation. There are ethical, legal, social, and economics issues to innovations. There was one theoretical story that was told about an owner sending his robot to get coffee at Starbucks. The robot went into Starbucks, saw a long line of customers, killed all the customers in order to get the coffee very rapidly, took the coffee back, and the owner said, "Why did you kill all those people?" And the robot said, "You didn't tell me not to." So technologies and big data manipulate and influence human decisions. There are multiple relationships between robots and jobs. So robots could reduce the number of jobs, or in some cases, they could increase the number of jobs. So if robots were to keep equipment up and running more and not give so much downtime for the equipment, those people interacting with that equipment might actually have a longer work time and a greater number of jobs. And then finally, the question, will humans be replaced by robots? So that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Nelson. Next to summarize the sessions and discussions and his own reaction to the earth science discussions is Dr. Jim Falk. Dr. Falk is the Honorary Professional Fellow of the Melbourne Sustainable Society Institute of the University of Melbourne in Australia. Dr. Falk.
I was very privileged to attend some intense and exciting discussions focused on the Earth system. But unlike perhaps the other sessions, these were particularly infused with a sense of concern about the vulnerability of the Earth system, and particularly the shadow of the urgent challenges of climate change. And as with other sessions, these ones were focused on the challenge of improving the well-being of humans everywhere, but with a recognition that if we, in the process, are substantially damaging our planetary environment, that will become an impossible task. As with other sessions, we focused and were reminded of spectacular progress in innovation in science and technology, but it still is not, especially in relation to the issue of climate change, is still not enough. So what's needed to achieve more? In the opening session, Charles Holliday stressed the need for us all to face in the same direction. And right through our sessions and other sessions, many speakers have emphasised the need for greater cooperation across boundaries between communities, companies, scientists, regions and nations. Now, this is no less than a request to change how we collectively relate to each other across the planet. In short, it's a request for an evolution beyond our current collective ability to manage our affairs. Another repeated realisation in the sessions has been that success in this requires engagement across all scales of human society. It can't be left to the global scale or national governments. It requires an engagement that goes from the local to the provincial to the national to regional to global. And whatever the advances at national or global level, the risks to be borne, disasters to be prepared for, and mitigation and adaptation actions to be taken will mostly be at much more local scale. And if local communities are not pressing for mitigation action or adaptation support from their governments, governments frequently will not risk initiating it. Take water, one of our sessions, the basic requirement for all life. It provides a good example. Across the planet, climate change is or promises to create significant changes to the dynamics and distribution of water. Challenges from this is often worsened by insufficiently regulated water use. The impacts of climate change on water cover a wide spectrum, from the acidifying and rising oceans, changes to the pattern and distribution and intensity of rain, snowfall, floods, droughts, hurricanes and typhoons. Drought continues in some places to combine with significant declines in the availability and quality of water supply. Globally, irrigated farming uses 70% of all fresh water. So especially in dry areas, there's an urgent need to harness the technologies of efficient use of water in agriculture. For example, through advanced on-farm irrigation systems, recharge of aquifers and reduced evaporation, new hydroponics, genetic approaches, applications of IT, geoinformation systems, artificial intelligence for precision agriculture and smart water use. But water is also the lifeblood of cities, and pressures on supply are changing with climate and at times conflicting with the demands of agriculture. The challenges of managing such impacts cross all scales, from the local farmer confronted by drought to a state such as California, which is now having to re-engineer its water supply to deal with increasing uncertainty, in part caused by accelerating melting of snow, which formerly stored water from winter rains for summer use. At larger scales, nations and regions of nations must collectively manage their use of shared rivers, such as the Mekong. And they must reach agreement on actions to reduce emissions, which by driving climate disruption can exacerbate future uncertainty. The same types of cooperation across scales is true for effective avoidance of disaster risk. The Sendai framework stresses that disaster risk reduction and management depends on coordination mechanisms within and across sectors and with relevant stakeholders at all levels. Vulnerability is vastly different in different locations, whether because of greater physical threats or poverty. And depending on local priorities, resilience needs to be built differently in different locations. And seemingly attractive techniques for reducing risk, for example, building flood control dams, may, by creating a false sense of security, actually encourage people to occupy areas that remain dangerous. So if resilience is to be built, it must be built in conjunction with and to a considerable extent by the potentially affected community. And whether it be the governance of the future of water, the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals, disaster prevention and response, the governance of the composition of the atmosphere, or the growing risks of debris in Earth space orbits, a crucial requirement is that people and organisations at all scales can see and assess the threats. They need to be able to see and reflect on the impact of their actions on others and that of others on them. That is a necessary capability for a dispersed but collaborative contribution to the governance of this small planet, and is a requirement for a rapid increase in the capacity in what social scientists call reflexivity, the ability to see and reflect on what we are doing and its consequences. Powerful technologies are now available to assist in providing the need for this capacity. From space, satellites can now allow us to monitor key indicators of climate change. With increasingly fine resolution, they can monitor physical changes across the surface of the planet, vertically through the atmosphere and across time. They can monitor human activities from agriculture to deforestation and even migration patterns. And this can provide vital and cost-effective inputs into the modelling necessary to predict natural and human-made disasters. But even with existing capacity, different climate models produce very different outcomes, even for predictions of global temperature. Capacity to predict cloud formation and precipitation is still far too crude. Much more data, better modelling is needed, especially to prepare for the outcomes of failures in climate governance. And beyond that is the more difficult question of how to get the insights available to relevant communities in a way that they can be used and in time. The oceans present a challenge to visibility. They cover 75% of the surface of the planet. They're crucial but comparatively poorly understood part of the biosphere. Less is known of their deeps than the surface of Mars. But oceans absorb about 40% of our carbon dioxide emissions, and on the one hand this defers the impacts of climate change on the land, but on the other their capacity to do so is reducing, and the oceans are warming and becoming more acidic. Changes to the ocean and the fish on which so many people depend for their protein, and damage to sensitive features like the Great Barrier Reef need to be understood and tracked. Yet satellite sensors cannot adequately penetrate into the depths. A substantially expanded effort of marine monitoring, supported in part by robot floats communicating back data to satellites, is urgent. In all aspects of the Earth system, the challenge of obtaining data and analysing it is vital for regulating our impacts and coping with change. Yet where this data is available, it is often not shared or usable in a form where it's needed. Too often it doesn't actually inform key decisions. This gap between the technical knowledge and its use where it is most needed is what economists would phrase as a persistent, wicked problem. There is no single solution to it, but improvement in relation to it is urgent. It is at the heart a challenge from governance. And so it's likely to be solved not just at one level or through one sector, but through efforts in all of them. But funding needs to be found to support that, and in principle it can be drawn from many sources. This is just one example of a more general proposition that flows out of the discussion at the Earth Science sessions. It is not only that the development and evolution of the processes and tools of governance are as central to solving our human problems as is the development of the technical knowledge and capabilities which can be utilised. Charles Holliday's image of the push me, pull you, trying to go forward and backwards at once, is also a metaphor for the current way governance approaches versus supporting science are developed. We recognise this tension, we say it needs resolving, but so far too much in relation to fixing it, we are Dr. Do Little. And from the insights this year, it seems that serious effort should be made to facilitate the development of innovation in science and needed developments in governments together in more integrated, mutually reinforcing synergy. This suggests there is an opportunity for the SDS Forum to further facilitate, shape and accelerate such effort.
Thank you, Dr. Falk. To discuss what was in the concurrent sessions and in the discussions on the topic of cooperation in science and technology. We'll hear from Dr. Muhammad Hagali Hassan. Dr. Hassan is the Executive Director of the World Academy of Sciences. Dr. Hassan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me begin by thanking Mr. Omi for inviting me once again to this magnificent event. I'm reporting on the track Science and Technology Cooperation. And there were 4 sessions, government, academia, industry cooperation, science diplomacy and international cooperation, cooperation and competition among global industries, and science and technology in developing countries. You can see a variety of topics have been handled there. But I actually went, this is my personal impression, with one question in mind. And the question that I had in mind is how science, technology, and innovation, and how cooperation in science, technology, and innovation can lead to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals and the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I got some answers but from some sessions, but not totally satisfied. So my feeling is that perhaps the topic is broad, cooperation in science and technology, and my suggestion to Mr. Omi, Chairman Omi, is that perhaps in one of the future sessions dealing with the issue of cooperation, we might give it more focus, say cooperation in science and technology for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, so that we might get some more information and some more case studies and experiences from different countries and regions dealing with this issue. But nevertheless, there was a strong feeling among the participants that collaboration and partnership would certainly lead to the design and implementation of inclusive, integrated, and innovative strategies for the benefit of communities worldwide. So that is the issue that I think everybody agreed upon. As I said, the discussions were very rich, very lively, and very interactive. And in the next few minutes, what I will do, I would highlight just 4 key messages that emerged out of the 4 sessions. The details, of course, of the discussions and summaries of the discussions and the recommendations you will find with the Secretariat, 4 summaries. Firstly, collaboration between academia and industry has indeed been very successful in many advanced countries. And the recent example mentioned at one of the sessions is the collaboration between the University of California, San Francisco, and the international pharmaceutical company, GSK, where researchers from both sides worked jointly to translate basic research into new therapies for cancer and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. But on the other hand, the status of such collaboration in most developing countries is far from satisfactory. And in the case of those developing countries where local industry is not well developed, there is a need for new and innovative ways to promote academia, industry, and government collaboration to generate science, technology, and innovation-based solutions to accomplish or to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. Such collaboration can be most fruitful if it focuses on specific SDGs and jointly develops inclusive solutions based on integrated science and technology, business, and social innovations. So 3 innovations have to be integrated, leading to sustainable and scalable results with large impact. In addition to its role as a facilitator of industry-academia collaboration, governments have a significant role in bringing the innovation to scale, and they can do that through various means of social innovation. Secondly, governments can also play an important role in promoting cooperation among global industries by facilitating open, collaborative innovation to develop transformative products and services. For example, the initiative that was just mentioned, the initiative of self-driving cars promoted by the Japanese government, is encouraging major manufacturers in Japan and Germany to collaborate in the experiment, as was mentioned by the Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Abe, at the opening session. In addition, the rapidly advancing digital technologies, including big data, Internet of Things, cloud technologies, and smart grids, offer new opportunities for collaboration between big companies in major green projects such as data management platforms for smart cities. For such collaboration to succeed, however, it should be guided by well-defined structures and roles of all partners. In addition, equitable benefits and the disposition of any intellectual property generated should be agreed upon upfront and before starting the project. Thirdly, the landscape of global research and innovation is rapidly changing and is increasingly becoming multipolar. The North-South gap that we know very well in research capacity and productivity is fortunately narrowing. But while we applaud the success of a small number of developing countries that are largely responsible for narrowing this gap, we must not allow this scientific success to overshadow the widening and deeply troubling South-South gap in science, technology, and innovation. The global scientific community, both in the North and in the South, should assist those countries that are scientifically deficient in their efforts to build science, technology, and innovation capacities to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. Such assistance will be most effective if it is directed towards supporting research universities and centers of excellence to train and retain intellectual leadership and science champions. A number of North-South projects supported by public and private sectors in Japan were mentioned in one of the sessions, including a cooperative project with Ghana on food security, which also involves collaboration between the University of Kyoto and the University of Ghana. And in my view, this is really an excellent example of North-South cooperation driven by government university industry partnership. I would like to see more of these examples where the private sector in the advanced countries join efforts to solve particular problems, developmental problems in some of the poorest countries in the world. This is something I think should be encouraged and should be one of the major recommendations that emerge out of this session, this forum. It is essential, however, for each developing country to design its own national policy for science, technology, and innovation with clear objectives linked to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. A promising example highlighted at one of the sessions is the Ghana Vision 2020, which was recently approved by Parliament with the policy objective of transforming the country from a low middle-income country to a middle-income country. Among other, of course, things that the government is going to implement is to increase the investment in research and development from 0.3% to 1%. And Mr. Chairman, fourthly, finally, science diplomacy takes many forms. When nations come together to negotiate cooperative agreements on fisheries management or infectious disease monitoring, they need scientific expertise. When scientists come together for complex multinational projects in astronomy or physics, such as the Square Kilometre Array, their nations devise diplomatic agreements on management and financing. And when political nations when political relations between two nations are strained or broken, joint research efforts can give them a way to keep talking and to build trust. Science diplomacy and international collaboration are two sides of the same coin. They reinforce each other to promote global cooperation and partnership in implementing large-scale multinational science projects such as CERN, SESAME, ITER, and SKA. In addition, science diplomacy and scientific collaboration flourish around international centers of excellence and world-class universities, which have the magnetic power to attract the best and brightest scientists irrespective of their country of origin. Academies of science and their various networks operating under the umbrella of the Inter-Academy Partnership have been successful in promoting science diplomacy by acting jointly to address critical issues of global and regional importance and issuing consensus reports and statements on such issues to advise and affect policy. Finally, it is also important to raise awareness among future science leaders on the policy and diplomacy aspects of their work by providing them with opportunities to attend major events such as the STS Forum, as well as to participate in science diplomacy courses such as the ones organized by my academy in Trieste and jointly with the American Association for the Advancement of Science, AAAS. With this, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dr. Hassan. Now, please join me in welcoming Their Imperial Highnesses Crown Prince Naruhito and Crown Princess Masako. Please be seated. Your Highness, Crown Prince Naruhito, this is not your first visit to the STS Forum, but we do want to tell you how honored we are that you join us here today. and Your Highness Crown Princess Masako, we would like to tell you on behalf of our chairman, Koji Omi, and on behalf of all of us, how very pleased and honored we are that you join us today as well. Welcome to the STS Forum. The theme of this forum is science and technology in society. That, of course, makes it different from most scientific meetings because we're not just here to present the science, we're here to discuss impact on society. To discuss that very broad topic and some of the discussions which occurred in the concurrent sessions and some of the plenary sessions, Professor Eric Mazur will provide you a summary and his thoughts on this central issue. Professor Mazur is the Belkanowski Professor of Physics and Applied Physics and Dean of Applied Physics at Harvard University. Professor Mazur is also president of the Optical Society in the United States. Professor Mazur.
Their Imperial Highnesses, Crown Prince Naruhito and Crown Princess Masako, Chairman Omi, distinguished colleagues, I have the pleasure of reporting on the concurrent sessions in the Society and Technology and Society track. The sessions were extremely well attended, often standing room only, and the discussions were extremely animated. And at the outset, I have to say that the task of summarizing the key messages from these sessions was daunting. On more than one occasion, different tables in the room reached diametrically opposing conclusions. Perhaps this in itself is one of the key messages of this track. This is just the beginning of a dialogue, and it emerged from the discussions that we face an important task ahead. In a world where the boundary between fact and fiction is increasingly blurred, we need to urgently find a way to bridge the gap that is developing between the science and technology community and society at large. In particular, we must improve communication between scientists and technologists on one hand and society at large and policymakers on the other. The first session focused on innovation in society, and it was pointed out right at the beginning that we live in a time where exponential change is forcing society to adapt in an unprecedented way. It was only 150 years ago that the phrase, "in the good old days," was coined. Before then, change in technology, knowledge, and practice was so slow that things did not change much in the human lifespan. Nowadays, the good old days are not that old at all. It might, for example, refer to the time before smartphones, only a few years ago, when people actually spoke to each other during meals. One of the participants mentioned a post by a teenager on social media that read, "The battery on my smartphone ran out, so I started talking to my family. They are really nice people." Now consider this. The largest retailer in 2017, Amazon. The largest data company in 2017, Google. The largest PR company in 2017, Facebook. The largest hotel company in 2017, Airbnb. The largest transportation company in 2017, Uber. Most of these companies were not around when the first STS Forum was held. Clearly, we live in an era where the dizzying rate of change has no precedent. By the time children graduate from school, the world has changed. It's not changed in the sense of normal biological change. It has changed in the way we do things. And if exponential change is to continue, the pace of transformative change will only increase. So how do we adapt? And how do we prepare the next generation for a future we don't know? The ideas that came up over the course of the 4 sessions were very much in tune with each other. So I took the liberty of synthesizing the key points from all 4 sessions. The first idea has to do with the curation and sharing of knowledge. In the old model, individuals or small groups of people owned novel ideas in the form of publications and patents. And these ideas were, or are, I should say, curated by entities such as universities, libraries, publishers, and patent offices through a process of review and peer review. And once published, these ideas become essentially static. What if instead we move towards a model where novel ideas are shared and curated by the community, much like Wikipedia operates? Others can contribute to the development of ideas. This knowledge is fluid and adaptable. Could this crowdsourcing of social innovation promote the pace, the quality, and most importantly perhaps the transparency of innovation? However, the lack of individual ownership, I would say, not however, the lack of individual ownership might increase social engagement and global collaboration and more easily permit multidisciplinary approaches to problem solving. But one unresolved question is how to reward individual contributions and incentivize people to contribute. After all, ownership and secrecy have played an important role in innovation. The second idea that transcended all sessions dealt with the unintended consequences of innovation. For example, gene editing means someone could develop new lethal viruses. Similarly, AI and machine learning could upset the balance between humans and machines. Who owns AI? Is it the public or private industry? Who controls it? Government or the private sector? We need ways to deal with all the societal consequences of innovation and consider ethics, law, psychology, and sociology alongside science and technology. And we better do this before we run into problems. The next idea, which to some degree is related to the previous one, has to do with the growing gap in trust between society at large and the scientific community. The ubiquitous availability of information and the lack of validation of much of that information means we live in a quote-unquote post-fact world. People seek out the facts they like to back up the conclusions that appeal to them. And the results of science are treated increasingly with suspicions by society at large and politicians. To some degree, I believe the science community owns this unfortunate development to itself, because science is often treated as a data dump of facts when it comes to communicating with the general public. Trust us, here are the ironclad facts. This robs the public of any understanding and demands that they trust science blindly. That, to say the least, is unethical. Perhaps we should take a page from Galileo, the founder of modern scientific thinking. He presented his ideas in a dialogue, always including the skeptic and the disbeliever. Science is not a set of immutable facts. It might be tentative, but most importantly, it is self-correcting. Scientific thinking is enormously powerful, not only for us, scientists, but also for the non-scientist. And I think it's essential, therefore, that we communicate science as a process, as a powerful way of thinking, which has been proven by history to change the world through the most amazing technological advances. Policymaking, which we already heard mentioned before, was extensively discussed in 2 of the 4 sessions, especially in the context of building a bridge between science and politics. However, science is global and long-term, while politics is local and short-term. Politicians need results quickly and reliably. Scientists need time, and results always include uncertainty. Science relies on a global collaboration that transcends national borders. Politics is governed by national borders. On top of this basic dilemma, the relationship between scientists and politicians is affected by the same gap in trust I mentioned before. While most politicians recognize the importance of science in driving economic growth and improving the quality of life, many question the integrity of science. It is therefore imperative that the science community is more proactive in this respect. The scientific community can bring a lot of expertise that is useful for policy making. It's especially important in this current age to embed science-trained people in government. And I think we should more strongly encourage future scientists to run for political office. How many science-trained politicians are there in your country? In most countries, the number is appallingly low. One participant mentioned that in her country, politicians brag about not having any education at all. It's their badge of honor. The science community urgently needs to address the lack of science-trained policymakers and actively engage in science advocacy to prevent further polarization between scientists and politicians. Scientists need to be better politicians, and politicians need to be better scientists. Finally, it is clear in a time of exponential change that education, a subject dear to my heart, is under stress. What we teach our students may not be relevant when they hit the job market. So what should we do? As problem-solving trumps factual knowledge in the digital age, stressing skills over content is critical. All the skills that come into play when solving problems. Critical thinking and design thinking skills, open-ended problem-solving skills, collaborative and communication skills, decision-making skills, ethics, self-directed and lifelong learning skills. One way which was suggested was to facilitate learning through projects. Content is brought in through these projects rather than overloading students with content and then have them apply rote problem solving to close-ended problems. As machines take on lower order thinking skills, we need to train our students to excel in the higher order thinking skills, including creativity and innovation. And we must recognize that the traditional way of teaching students problem solving does not lead to the development of these relevant skills. The traditional approach involves usually having students apply often memorized procedures to find the answers to closed problems which have just one specific solution. Authentic problems, however, such as the one that we face in daily life and in society, generally have multiple solutions, and the problem-solving process is as important as the outcome. One issue that was also raised was that university rankings are counterproductive to innovation in education. Rather than focusing on improving and adjusting education, rankings induce universities to adjust themselves to the ranking criteria in order to maximize their ranking. It takes courage to brush this all aside, to redesign our curriculum, and to transform the way in which we teach and assess student learning. As Machiavelli said in The Prince, there is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things. Because the innovator has for enemies all those who have done well under the old conditions and lukewarm defenders in those who may do well under the new. So I believe we really need to rethink our approach to education to prepare the next generation for a future that is likely to be very different from today. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mazur. We all have cell phones in our pockets, most of us do, which I'm told represents more computing power than the systems that supported the astronauts who landed on the moon and returned safely to Earth. We're also told that due to machine learning and artificial intelligence, that during our lifetime, machines could be doing 60% of present jobs. To provide his perspective on these topics is Dr. Hiroaki Kitano. Dr. Kitano is President and CEO of Sony Computer Laboratories here in Japan. Dr. Kitano.
Well, thank you very much. The Imperial Highness, Crown Prince Naruhito, Crown Princess Masako, Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen. ICT sessions, which I will be reporting, is composed of 4 sessions that are artificial intelligence, IoT, Internet of Things, big data, and cybersecurity. Well, interestingly, and for obvious reason, there are numbers of issues that are common in all sessions. So practically, all sessions focus on pretty much the same theme, but with a different focus in each session. So that actually reflects the fact those 4 aspects are tightly integrated at this moment. There are 3 major issues throughout all 4 sessions. First one is AI impacts on society, how AI will be developed, how AI penetrates into our society, how that will actually change our society. The second is data integrity and a possible inequity to the data access. The third is cybersecurity in a broader sense. Let me start from the first issues on artificial intelligence and their social impact. What people are concerned about is that with increasing capability of AI, specifically with the recent breakthrough in the deep learning-based AI or deep reinforcement learning-based AI, machine can now perform, I would say, outperform human in specific domain. This was symbolically demonstrated by the success of the AlphaGo by the Google DeepMind, which beat the best human Go player by large margin. And such development in AI may result in high-impact applications in broad areas, like in medicine, manufacturing, transportations, possibly the scientific discovery, and an area that the world might benefit. And probably there will be a substantial progress that will bring a significant benefit to the society. At the same time, concerns were expressed how would AI impact the society, specifically on the job opportunities and social stabilities and other aspects. As our chairman just mentioned, there are a lot of discussion about with the job opportunity in the future, so with the growing penetrations on AI in our society, there may be a number of jobs which will simply disappear or never come back. For example, we're talking about autonomous driving vehicle. Now what will be the number of drivers in the future? That then the driver can relocate themselves into the other jobs. Well, that's not necessarily an easy thing to do. And how to mitigate the impact of AI in a society that need to be considered. For example, in an autonomous driving car, with the introduction of autonomous driving car, the AI researchers now believe number of traffic accidents was significantly reduced, which will bring a significant positive impact to the society. At the same time, the job opportunity of the drivers and then how that will actually affect all the social structure is something that we cannot simply dismiss. Now, observation was made that the AI may be beneficial to the countries like Japan, where the population is rapidly aging and suffering from the lack of labor force. So we can actually compensate for the lack of labor force by the introduction of the AI and robotics, which is the current consensus in Japanese policy making and the scientific community and the industry. At the same time, this is not necessarily the case with the country who has growing populations, because they need more job opportunities and they are not interested in replacing the opportunity by AI and robotics. With those countries, introduction of AI robotics may actually result in the social inequity and potentially the social unrest. And those issues has to be taken seriously. Now, second issue has been the big data and their use in the AI system, which is pretty much intermixed. And the current artificial intelligence system requires a gigantic amount of data to train and continue to train the deep learning-based system. And this means countries and companies that can access very large volume of high-quality data will have a significant advantage over who cannot. And if this inequity in the potential data access persists, there will be a big gap between someone who actually can access such data and continue to take advantage of the advanced AI to have a better access to the data against to the someone who will be able to do that. So at this moment, what people perceive is the United States and China may have dominance in the data because of the gigantic IT companies there and because of their large market. For example, now we have Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and those companies in the United States have a gigantic amount of data and they continue to access the data because of the success in the market. And in China, the companies like Tencent, Baidu, Alibaba have a gigantic comparable or probably even bigger amount of data than their US peers. So what happened with other countries? How we can actually cope with such data dominance in the specific countries like the United States and Japan, and how Japan, for example, or Europe or other countries will cope with this reality of the data dominance. It's not just country by countries or like big companies against others. There are possible inaccessibility of the data in the small business or a part of section of the society, then they might actually result in a serious disadvantage in the building the system or like gain the benefit of the technological development. And one of the fundamental danger of this kind of data dominance that we have to be careful is the data fairly represented? Is data treated in an ethical manner? That someone might actually create the data which actually have a potential bias that might reflect our potential bias in the community or a potential bias in the industrial scientific practice. So that kind of bias in the data set might be reflected in the AI system which is trained based on the data that might result in a decision which could be ethically problematic. So obviously scientists are not too naive about those issues, and there's active research going on to rectify the problem. Still, that we have to be very careful and to be warned about the possible ethical issues on the data. Now, so we actually have to worry about after those is that emergence of the autonomous system, which is have to worry, and that will be the advantage. That means autonomous system we're going to be highly autonomous, and we're going to have high capabilities. That at the end of the day, we have to come to the trust of the autonomous system. How are we going to trust the system? Probably that means that can we trust the developer of the system behind? So how we ensure that? Because some of the autonomous system won't be able to explain you why they took the decisions, or if there's irregular, unexpected behavior by the autonomous system, how we cope with that. That may not be actually obvious because we do not design, we just train the system. So this issue of the autonomous system big data will be even more serious with the penetration of Internet Things, with the ubiquitous presence and the connectivity of device and cloud services. Vast amount of real data, not only in the Internet and cyberspace, will be collected to the AI systems. At the same time, widely different IoT system can be prone to the cyber attack. So someone might actually penetrate into the system to actually damage the system, or even worse, try to actually implement or install the data that is not favorable for us, and the kind of data that we don't want our system to learn that can be actually placed in the system. And that will be the serious risk in our society if we are too dependent on the highly autonomous system. So AI data integrity cyber attack has been a three main focus of discussion within the four current decisions, although there are differences in the weight. So that's going to show the convergence of the issues that we are facing at this moment. Now, overall, while we are looking at this emergence of autonomous intelligence system in our society, rather than mere big data analysis, that there are qualitative difference between the data analysis level and AI system with high level autonomy backed by the gigantic data continuously into the system for them to learn. There is a new kind of machinery that we have not built before. So it should be noted there are differences in the way AI think and how we perceive the world, because we're constrained by our cognitive capability, where AI have a different constraint. The result of the way we perceive the world and think in the AI system and human beings is not necessarily the same. Particularly, we are very much constrained by the experience, cultural context, and cognitive capabilities. So the challenge is how we can harmonize AI system into a society. Then we have a slightly different perception of thinking patterns. And the human-computer interaction between the human and AI will be critically important. Now, one of the interesting questions raised in some of the sessions has been the very interesting one. Can machine be creative? So we are talking about AI system which can outperform in a defined task like a Go or autonomous driving. So people start asking the questions. There's active research going on. Can we create a machine that is very creative? This has been an exciting topic, and some of the interesting art piece and the music has been developed by the AI, and that are not bad, actually. So we consider the creativity is a very human nature and probably not be easily overtaken by the machine, but actually machine is getting there. So we see the interesting development in coming years to actually uncover the nature of the human creativities. Can we actually redefine the creativity by machines? And one of the interesting challenge in the context of STS was the question, can AI make a major scientific discovery in the future? Probably not so much today, and there's a mixed view, and there's an even challenging question, can AI win Nobel Prize? So that can AI be one of the laureates, which will be announced sometime this week in the future? And then obviously, at this moment, AI is nowhere near the laureates, and so we can be very assured on the human scientific activity. But I think there's substantial innovations, research development in the scientific discovery by the AI systems. And in the future, AI system will be a very competent companion for our research, and possibly AI system might actually make a scientific discovery themselves that might worth Nobel Prize. Of course, the trick is we have to fool the Nobel Committee so they can actually award the AI system without knowing that actually is not human. Well, obviously, those line of future perspective scare the people as well. Therefore, there's ample discussion on the dark side of AI. At the same time, this AI system, which combines the big data, IoT, and well guided by the cybersecurity technology, might actually bring us a very bright future, because we are facing the serious problem, the medicines, sustainabilities. We might actually need AI for the survival, the AI system to actually discover the fundamental truths on your technology that might actually cut through the future of the mankind. And that actually might transform our civilizations into the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Katano. The final section or grouping of concurrent sessions and discussions was around the impact of science and technology on cities and mobility. To help us understand that topic, Ray Johnson will provide his perspective on these topics. Ray is an executive in residence with the Bessemer Venture Partners and is a former senior vice president and chief technology officer of Lockheed Marriott. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, Hank. Crown Prince and Princess, Chairman Omi, ladies and gentlemen, it's great to be here to summarize this important topic. Transportation and housing are vital to modern living, and they consume between 30% and 60% of our incomes. Depending on where you live, food and housing and transportation kind of change places, but generally speaking, 30% to 60%. They're also major contributors to climate change, and they're specifically areas that need to be addressed in order to achieve the climate change goals. In fact, I think there is no greater topic that links science, technology, and society, and so therefore it's a perfect topic for the STS to investigate. Population growth and urbanization are happening. Cities are getting more populated, and megacities are forming. In fact, the Tokyo, Osaka megacity that's being formed that we're really a part of is one of the largest in the world. We have opportunities to improve the transportation, the mobility, and to create smart cities. If we don't act, or if we take the wrong actions, we can also face a disaster where the cities don't support safety, security, and jobs. Creating that smart future involves technologies, policies, and actually society as a whole. Having infrastructure that is modern, robust, and efficient is critical for long-term productivity growth and prosperity for any nation. In fact, it's critical to commerce and competitiveness of the nation. Increasingly, the opportunity for advances in innovation in transportation infrastructure and greater mobility will require the integration of many disciplines and domains. The connection of the hard infrastructure, that is the roads, the bridges, the railways, the waterways, etc., with the soft infrastructure. Just like the previous speaker talked about, we're going to have autonomous systems that are going to be data intensive, so it's not just driving the car on the highway, it's driving the car and having the data access that's necessary to do that. So big data, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, sensors, electrification, advanced materials, the associated policy, the public-private partnerships, behavioral sciences, you get the point. All of these entities have to work together to make the city smart and the transportation proper. As Hank said, and I think Hank was quoting Bill Gates, that we tend to overestimate the near-term changes and underestimate the long-term changes. I think it's interesting to look at autonomous vehicles. Autonomous vehicles are going to happen. Every major car company in the world is investing in this. They're building partnerships. They're bringing in new companies, and it's going to happen. It's likely going to happen and ignore the lights and shadows aspects of autonomous systems. I like to use the internet as an example. We had an opportunity to be connected to the internet, and many of us did that. Cybersecurity was a second thought, and the same thing is true for autonomous systems. Ethical questions arise in next-generation autonomous systems, even though those systems, again, as previous speaker said, are likely to be safer. They'll reduce accidents. And we have thousands of traffic deaths around the world today, but we question, will an autonomous system decide to run over a child or an elderly person, and how do you make that kind of choice? Well, humans make that kind of choice all the time, usually by accident. Still, though, the autonomous systems are going to be questions regarding those ethics. Even in advanced economies, the hard infrastructure has remained relatively the same over the last century. Automobiles, trains, planes, and other modalities have seen upgrades. They remain more or less the same old forms of transportation. The internal combustion engine in cars, as well as planes and trains, haven't changed much since their inception. The national infrastructure to support these modalities vary dramatically around the world. Cutting-edge transportation and mobility systems are in development. Certainly you see them here in Japan. You see them in China. You don't see them much in the United States. In fact, for example, in the United States, the 2017 infrastructure report gives aviation a D, bridges a C+, inland waterways a D, ports a C+, and mass transit in the United States a D-. So these are the kind of issues that you have to deal with when you think about bringing next-generation mobility and transportation to bear. Society and transport are deeply entwined. To rethink transport means to rethink the way we live and the way we design cities and urban environments, which requires public-private partnerships, as I mentioned. Cities are made of people. What is the social role of cities going forward? I like to use the following example, and I'm sure you see it in Japan as well. And that is that kids today play games on their Nintendo or their Xbox with people around the world, and they become close friends, and they don't even know their neighbors. So what's the role of cities in this kind of mobile environment where connectivity is available, but yet the city infrastructure has to change in order to support the smart city. We need to start working the sustainability issue early. Greenfield cities are easier. Existing cities, as I mentioned, due to the infrastructure, require continuous evolution. They need processes and mechanisms. They won't happen on their own. They need top-down and bottoms-up planning and coordination. We need to take an integrated systems approach that combines good governance to achieve the desired quality of life. Mr. Omi, we have great opportunities to make our transportation systems efficient and eco-friendly. We have great opportunities to enhance the safety, security, and jobs in our cities. Many entities must start working together and planning to start that new path. Doing so will result in a positive outcome. Ignoring the problem will likely result in a very bad outcomes as megacities develop around the world. Transportation and smart cities are the ultimate example of the lights and shadows of technology. The STS Forum, in addressing these topics, is playing a major role in highlighting these important issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Ray. This is the 14th annual meeting of the STS Forum. After 2 or 3 of these meetings, we realized there would be a tremendous benefit, first of all, to having young scientists with us, and secondly, a tremendous benefit to them to see what happens at this forum. One of the very first things we learned is our Future Leaders program had the wrong name. They weren't future leaders, they were leaders already. They were young, they were under 40. So we changed the name of the program to Young Leaders Program. This year we had 147 of young men and women from, I believe it was 80 countries. It's an enormous number. And reporting on those meetings are 2 from our Young Leaders group. First is Dr. Samia Sabrina, Associate Professor of Engineering and Technology at Bangladesh University. Professor Sabrina.
Thank you. Their Imperial Highness, Crown Prince Naruhito, Crown Princess Masako, Chairman Omi, honorable speakers, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning. Actually, I was very much excited from the last couple of months when I was first nominated by the World Academy of Science to attend this meeting, as I believe it is essential for the future leaders to be developed for the betterment of the future world. STS Forum has given us a common platform to interact and bridge network with the people of different expertise. It provided us the opportunity to meet world top current leaders from diverse fields like scientists, Nobel laureates, engineers, social scientists, policymakers, and leaders in academia, business, and government in a common plaza. An attraction of the STS Forum is the dialogue between future leaders and Nobel laureates. During the dialogue, we are free to discuss and exchange our views with the Nobel laureates, which I think is a great opportunity for the future leaders. Moreover, it would be an achievement for the future leaders if it is possible to get mentored by the Nobel laureates. As I understand, science and technology is the key to success to any society. And scientists need freedom. Freedom to think independently, freedom to think out of the box, and create revolutionary innovation. Geography has boundary, geography has some limitation, but technology is global. It is for all. So, technology innovation, technology transfer, public awareness, understanding of science and technology through proper communication would create a big positive impact on the society and would give us a better world. Last but not the least, I express my sincere gratitude and thanks to STS Forum for giving us this opportunity and especially for the encouragement of the active participation of the female future leaders. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sabrina. We also have with us this morning Dr. Glenn Platt. Dr. Platt is the Research Program Director for the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organization. Dr. Platt.
Reflecting on the past few days, two words come to mind that I never thought I'd use when describing a conference around science and technology. Emotional journey. Their Imperial Highnesses, Crown Prince Naruhito, Crown Princess Masako. Ladies and gentlemen, for me personally, the past few days has been an incredible emotional journey of highs and lows and everything in between. Let me start with some lows. It's disappointing to hear that broader society is no longer clear about the benefits of science and technology. Whilst appreciating the open debate, I was somewhat shocked to hear suggestions that the world has no chance of meeting its Paris Accord commitments. I got angry when I heard someone say science has no role to play in solving world poverty or gender equality. Spending my time amongst Future Leaders Group has been an incredible privilege and very humbling. We're a very diverse group. I've had discussions about replicating brain cells to solve horrible illnesses. I, an electrical engineer, learnt that there was a thing called the nasal biome. And, as an Australian, can you imagine my shock when I learnt that studying fluids had nothing to do with drinking beer? Whilst there's incredible diversity, there are two common attributes amongst all us future leaders. The first is to do with inspiration. I would venture that for every single one of us, a key part of our career journey has been someone who inspired us to continue, to take the hard road. Spending the past few days with the Nobel laureates has been incredibly inspiring. Access to such a group of individuals has provided the most amazing of opportunities, from one-on-one discussions about career paths to the opportunity to hold Professor Haldane's actual Nobel medal. Heck, he almost let me bite down on it just to make sure it wasn't chocolate. Time with the laureates has made the almost impossible seem almost achievable. The second thing that's common amongst the future leaders was a clear vision. Every single one of the future leaders I spoke to could tell you where their little bit fitted, where the work they were doing was going to contribute to the world. A common thread of the past few days of our conference is that science and technology need to be much better at telling our story. Imperial Highnesses, Mr. Omi, ladies and gentlemen, let me reassure you, the future leaders can tell the story of science and technology and how critical it is. The future leaders know how and where their work will benefit society. I said this has been an emotional journey. Ultimately, it finishes with an incredible high. Spending time with the Nobel laureates and the future leaders gives me the most profound optimism. For us, there simply is no question. Science and technology are the way to solve the world's big problems. Science and technology will provide the solutions to poverty and climate change. For us, there is no debate. We understand people's fears about the future, and once again, science and better communication is the answer. To the broader audience, when I look around at my colleagues, I'm confident our future is in safe hands. To our future leaders, I simply say, we know the challenge, let's go and deliver.
Thank you, Dr. Platt. Before we conclude this session, I would like a few volunteers from the panel to help me understand and help all of us understand a central question. The focus of this forum is on the lights and shadows of technology. Now, it seems to me that the lights of science and technology are the fun part. That's what we do. The shadows are more problematic. And I think we need to recognize that, number one, some of these are real. I don't think Henry Ford set out to destroy the planet, but here we are. So there are some real, long-term, unintended consequences that we probably don't spend enough time on. There's another kind of shadows, which may or may not be real, but it reflects a misunderstanding or lack of understanding or a fear of technology, artificial intelligence taking over the world, genetically modified foods. There is a long list. Some real, some not real. So what can we in the science and technology community do to mitigate the shadows and to make sure humankind benefits from the lights? Do we have a volunteer? Yes. Professor Wahlberg? Yes, we have several. Professor Wahlberg first. Could we pass a microphone up?
Thank you. Oh, okay. So Donna Nelson, University of Oklahoma, President of the American Chemical Society last year. So as a chemist, we've been dealing with these things for a long time. Teaching organic chemistry students as I do for many years, I am totally convinced that students and the general public are becoming much more knowledgeable about science. They know science, they understand science. I think the problem, the slight differentiation is, do they appreciate science? And do they appreciate scientists? It's a subtle but very real difference. And I think that's what we need to get over. For example, you may have heard people say, what we need to do is to remove all of the chemicals from our water. Well, water is a chemical. Or we need to remove all of the chemicals from our food. Well, food is a chemical. And so they need to understand and appreciate that chemicals surround them. Chemicals are not necessarily bad. Chemicals form every single thing that surrounds us, the clothes we wear, our tables, the carpeting, the linoleum, the wall components. The only thing that a chemical does not constitute is a vacuum. And so I think it's really necessary for people to not just understand the science, but appreciate the science and the scientists that are behind it. I think that would be a good first step.
Thank you, Professor Nelson. Professor Wahlberg, did you have a comment? No. Okay. Professor Falk, we'll go down the line. That's probably the easiest way.
I'm actually a professor of science and technology studies, which is what my academic career has been for most of my academic life, although I started as a theoretical physicist. So that's the study of science and technology in social context. And this issue of how to get the best out of science, not in the sense of how to simply progress the science, but how to get the best in a social sense, is a challenge which is discussed in that discipline and has been over many years. But I think the first place is to recognize that there are people doing research in this actual area. And I don't think we make use of them enough. I don't think we, for example, recognize that there are students being trained in interdisciplinary analysis. They have to start with a discipline, otherwise they don't know what it's about at all. But to be trained in bridging across between the two or multiple areas of human thought and expertise is a skill. So I think we need to train people more to do that and utilize that more. That's the first thought. The second thing I think is that we need to engage the public. There are many people in the community who are becoming aware of the importance of science and think they know how to engage in it. But I think what they have not really engaged in enough is the scientific approach to critically understanding science and utilising it in solving problems. Now, part of that is scientists' fault, because we need to engage in that critical process in an accessible way. It's not just a question of transferring the insights, it's a question of transferring the methodology. And I think that that is a task which more scientists, more technologists need to spend some of their time doing. There are two innovations I want to talk to you about briefly. The first is a thing called The Conversation, which is now operating in Australia, the UK, and maybe spreading to other countries. It's been developed by universities, and it is an online forum which is curated so that academics are required to give short, accessible analyses of contemporary issues in real time, responding to policy issues, technical issues, environmental issues, technological developments. And it works very well. And anyone can subscribe to it for free. And I think this service needs to be expanded across the planet. And I think maybe I should leave it at that, in fact.
Thank you. We are running out of time. Let me quickly ask Professor Mazur, Dr. Catano, and Ray Johnson to make a very brief comment on this very big topic.
Sure. Well, I already mentioned improving communication in order to address misunderstanding of science by the public at large, but I'd like to add, stress actually the need of bringing in the social sciences and the training of scientists. Let's think about a simple psychological fact in regards to transportation. We discussed autonomous vehicles before. Let's think for a moment just about the fatalities in car accidents in the US in 1 year. It's 35,000 per year. That is the same as one 737 falling out of the sky every single day, which would be totally unacceptable. Yet the way people assess risk, comparing, let's say, the risk of flying with the risk of stepping into a car, is completely disproportionate to the actual numbers. So training scientists in social sciences, in the psychological and other aspects of science and technology, I think is going to be crucially important into improving the understanding of science by society.
Thank you. Dr. Catano.
Yes. There's actually this extreme scenario that they are exaggerated by the media, that the Terminator scenario, the AI will actually destroy us, actually. You know, that kind of scenario is purely unrealistic, because right now the AI scientists, researchers are struggling to make a machine more autonomous, and we don't have a technology to sufficiently autonomous to actually get the proper decisions and to coordinate in a way. But at the same time, the issue is the disparity of the society in terms of job opportunity, income, and also like if you have like AI systems which can actually extract the patterns behind the data, that the company or government who actually can have that kind of AI system will actually see what will going to happen in the future, where someone who won't be able to see. So like this disparity we're going to be the serious problem. We need to actually take a serious countermeasure to actually ease this disparity. At the same time, like a disparity on a different angle is if you have like some a group of people who actually had the evil idea to have like thousands of drones and trying to actually attack in one government installations. At this moment, we don't have an efficient measure to defend our facilities, actually. So there's a quite substantial disparity in every aspect, so we have to ease that.
Thank you. Ray, very briefly.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Hank. Your question had to do with with real analysis, getting to the real issues and separating out the things that aren't factual. I live in Washington, D.C., and in Washington, D.C. we have a saying, and the saying says that facts are negotiable and perceptions are not. And I think that's driven by just the point that I think you made, and that was that scientists need to be better politicians and certainly better communicators, and we need to have more representation of science and technology in the political environment. And I think both of those will enable the funding, the care, and the thoughtful analysis that will lead to the separation of what's real and what's not.
Thank you. Please remain in place and again join me in thanking their Royal Highnesses for joining us here at the SDS Forum today. Thank you. Please join me in thanking our very hard-working panel. Thank you. Thank you. Our session is adjourned.